Happy 4th of July. This is titled How America Was Hijacked in 1913. I wrote it. Let's take a walk through history, but not the bedtime story that you were taught in school. I'm talking about the real thing, the dark corridors where governments are overthrown without a shot fired, where currencies are conquered without a single bullet, and where religion becomes a Trojan horse for empire. In 1913, the United States lost its financial sovereignty. Most Americans are told this happened through legislation. The Federal Reserve Act, signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson just before Christmas. But if you really want to understand what happened that year, you have to understand what happened before the bill was signed. Because before America was handed over to the private banking syndicate, something had to be cleared out of the way first, and it was the opposition. And that opposition had names like Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, and Colonel Jacob Astor, three of the wealthiest, most influential opponents of this central banking bill. Men who understood what a private central banking system would do to this country. And all three of them, by invitation of J.P. Morgan, boarded the Titanic in April of 1912. Morgan was the architect behind the Federal Reserve. He had more to gain from it than anyone. But curiously, Morgan never boarded. A last-minute illness, they said. He was later seen in France with his mistress, relaxed and unbothered. Meanwhile, the Titanic sailed at full speed through iceberg-ridden waters under the command of Captain Edward Smith, a man reportedly under the influence of the Society of Jesus, better known as the Jesuits. Warnings of ice were ignored, signals were dismissed, and when the iceberg struck, those three men, Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor, didn't make it out alive. Within months, the resistance was gone. By December 1913, the Federal Reserve Act passed quietly, while most of Congress was away on Christmas break. With the stroke of a pen, the power to issue and control American currency was placed in the hands of a private banking syndicate with ties that extended far beyond the U.S. borders. Now, pause and ask yourself, how do you remove the last major voices of dissent before orchestrating the biggest financial coup in U.S. history? You invite them on a boat. But it wasn't just banking. That was only one prong of a much older, deeper plan, a religious plan, an imperial plan, and one Congress tried to warn us about. In February of the same year, 1913, a representative from Georgia named Thomas E. Watson stood on the floor of Congress and did something no one else had dared. He read into the official congressional record the extreme oath of induction of the Jesuits, a document that lays bare their methodology and allegiances, and he wasn't speaking from a pulpit. He wasn't warning about theology. He was warning us about a methodology, about infiltration, about secrecy that is oath-bound, and the annihilation of all who stand in their way by any means necessary. He knew what we were up against, and he entered that oath into congressional record just months after the Titanic sank, and just months before the Federal Reserve quietly passed on holiday. Coincidence? You decide. Now let me be clear. The Jesuits aren't just a religious order. They're a military intelligence organization designed as missionaries and professors. They're founded to destroy Protestantism, to protect the papacy, and to infiltrate every institution from within. But what most people don't know is that the Jesuits were invented simultaneously with the Protestant Reformation, because they were the Protestant Reformation. So in that instance, they were created in order to double the sphere of influence of the papacy by creating its own seeming opposition. So the papacy has one way of worshiping Christ called, the universal truth, what they think is the only true church. And then they also control 39 to 40,000 denominations of Protestant, which pretend to be in opposition to the teachings of Jesus Christ, which they're not. So anyway, now let me be clear. Their motto, perinde ac cadaver, as if a corpse, that is the level of obedience that they require. And this is the etymology of why we choose to incorporate rather than operate as an individual soul, because there's more power in laying your free will of the soul to death and letting an outside entity come in and take over. Does that sound familiar? And for centuries, they've excelled at the long game doing this. They've infiltrated our schools through turning children rainbow and to the Bible, simultaneously controlling both ends of that, pumping dollars into one of them on the West Coast and into the other opposition on the East Coast. And people running these school systems haven't picked out that both are a form of fracking. And so they're rubbing the East Coast philosophy of Christianity in the schools against the West Coast philosophy of transgender and all that stuff in the schools. And they're harvesting the luge in between. And so they infiltrate our schools, they infiltrate our courts and our governments. They take control of the press, they weaponize education, spouses, they control our currency systems, they use war and terror as tools of purification. And they always swear allegiance to a foreign power, the papacy. Does that sound like something we should ignore? Does that sound just like some other religious order? Thomas Watson didn't think so. Now the mainstream will tell you that the oath that I'm about to post in the description is a forgery, but that's what they always say when someone gets close to the truth. What matters here is not just the authenticity of the document, but the fact that a sitting U.S. congressman believed it enough to submit it to the official congressional record like a Hail Mary, and right at the moment when the U.S. monetary policy was being hijacked. They murdered our opposition. They infiltrated our government. They hijacked our money. And they did it under the mask of Christ, which brings us back to the central thesis of my book. Christ is Belial, the fraud that reset time, the deception that redirected human consciousness from sole sovereignty into servitude. So please read the oath. I'm going to provide it for you in text. You can have your phone read it to you. The reason I'm not going to read it to you is because I do believe in the demonic, and I know for a fact when I'm reading it, especially if I do it aloud, that I'm evoking something within myself that I don't want to participate in. And you'll know what I mean when you read it. So think about all of that today on the 4th of July and try to ask yourself, is there any authenticity left in this day at all? If there is, it's going to happen through you. Have a good day.